Chicago in winter was a beast with teeth of ice and a heart of stone. The wind howled through the city's concrete canyons, carrying flakes of snow that stung like needles. Beneath the rusted skeleton of an old railway bridge in the city's industrial outskirts, Malik crouched, his thin frame shivering under a patchwork of cardboard and salvaged blankets. At 12 years old, he was small for his age, his dark skin chapped by the cold, his eyes sharp and wary, like those of a fox who'd learned the world was no friend. Malik had no parents, no home, no past he could cling to. His mother had died. When he was 5, a vague memory of warmth and lullabies swallowed by the years. His father was a ghost, a name he'd never known. The streets had raised him, taught him to scavenge, to dodge trouble, to survive. He lived under the bridge, in a makeshift shelter of tarp and crates, where the train's rumble was his lullaby, and the river's frozen breath his blanket. Each morning, Malik woke to the same ritual. Check his stash of scavenged cans and bottles, count the coins he'd earned from recycling, and venture into the city to beg or barter for food. The snow made it harder. People hurried past, heads down, their pity frozen over like the sidewalks. Malik didn't blame them. He'd learned early that kindness was a luxury, and Chicago in December had none to spare. Today was no different. The sky was a slab of gray, the air so cold it burned his lungs. Malik wrapped his scavenged coat, too big, with a torn sleeve, tighter around himself and headed toward the loop, where the crowds were thicker and the trash cans richer. He carried a plastic bag for cans, his fingers numb through the holes in his gloves. The city pulsed around him, horns blaring, Christmas lights blinking, shoppers clutching bags of gifts. Malik kept his head low, invisible to the world. By noon, he'd collected enough cans to trade for a hot dog from a vendor who sometimes took pity on him. He ate it slowly, savoring the warmth, then headed toward Grant Park, where the wind was less brutal and the park's benches offered a place to rest. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the frozen fountain, a frail figure in a tattered coat that looked too fine for the streets. Her silver hair was matted with snow, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if praying for warmth. She wasn't moving, not really, just a slight tremor like a leaf caught in the wind. Malik stopped, his breath fogging in the air. Something about her tugged at him, a pull he couldn't name. He approached cautiously, his sneakers crunching in the snow. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice small against the wind. "You okay?" She didn't respond. Her eyes, pale and clouded, stared at nothing. Malik edged closer, crouching to her level. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow. She wasn't dressed for the cold. No gloves, no scarf, just that thin coat and a pair of leather shoes, cracked and soaked. She looked lost, not just in the park, but in her own mind. "Hey," Malik tried again, louder. "You need help?" Her head turned slightly, her gaze unfocused. I don't know," she whispered, her voice brittle. "Where am I?" Malik's stomach twisted. He'd seen people like this before, lost, confused, broken by the streets or something deeper. But she didn't belong here. Her coat, though dirty, was tailored. Her shoes, though ruined, were expensive. She was someone, or had been. "You're in Grant Park," he said. "Chicago. It's freezing out here." "You got a place to go?" She shook her head, a slow, dazed motion. I can't remember." Her voice cracked, and she clutched her coat tighter. "It's so cold," Malik hesitated. He could walk away. He'd done it before, left people to their fates. Survival meant looking out for himself, but her eyes, wide and frightened, held him. He thought of his mother, a hazy memory of her holding him during a storm. He couldn't leave this woman to die. "Come on," he said, standing. "I'll help you." She looked at him, uncertain, but when he offered his hand, she took it. Her fingers were like ice, trembling in his grip. Malik led her through the park, back toward the bridge. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The walk, too. The bridge took longer than usual, the snow slowing their steps. The woman leaned heavily on Malik, her breaths coming in short, pained gasps. He kept talking to her, asking questions she couldn't answer. Her name, where she lived, if she had family. She only shook her head, her silence heavy with confusion. When they reached the bridge, Malik helped her down the embankment, careful not to slip on the ice. His shelter was a patchwork of scavenged materials, a tarp strung between crates, a mattress of cardboard, a small fire pit where he burned scraps of wood when he could find them. It was nothing, but it was his. "Sit here," he said, guiding her to a crate covered with a blanket. He rummaged through his stash, pulling out his only spare blanket, a thin, stained thing he'd found in a dumpster. He draped it over her shoulders, then grabbed his tin cup and filled it with snow. He set it near the fire pit where a small flame flickered, fed by broken pallets. "You gotta stay warm," he said, more to himself than to her. He didn't know what he was doing, only that she needed help, and he was all she had. The woman clutched the blanket, her eyes fixed on the fire. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're kind." Malik shrugged, embarrassed. He wasn't used to gratitude. He handed her the cup once the snow had melted into lukewarm water. "Drink this. I got some food, too." He dug out his prize from the day before, half a granola bar wrapped in plastic. He broke it in two, giving her the bigger piece. She hesitated, then took it, nibbling slowly. Malik watched her, his own hunger a dull ache he ignored. "What's your name?" he asked, sitting cross-legged on the cardboard. She frowned, her brow furrowing. I think it's Eleanor. Yes, Eleanor." She said it like she was testing the word, unsure if it fit. "Eleanor," Malik repeated. "I'm Malik." She smiled faintly, the first sign of warmth in her face. "Malik?" she echoed. "That's a strong name." He didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on keeping the fire going. The wind howled outside, rattling the tarp. The temperature was dropping, the kind of cold that could kill. Malik knew it too well. He'd survived nights like this. But Eleanor, she wasn't built for it. Through the night he stayed awake, feeding the fire, checking on her. She drifted in and out of sleep, muttering fragments of memories, a house, a garden, a man's voice, calling her name. Malik listened, piecing together what he could. She wasn't a street person. She was someone important, someone who'd slipped through the cracks. By morning she was still alive, but weaker. Her cough was worse, her hands trembling even under the blanket. Malik knew she needed more than he could give. Real food, a doctor, a warm bed. But he had none of those things, and the city outside was a frozen wasteland. "I'm gonna get help," he told her, pulling on his coat. "You stay here, okay? Keep the fire going." Eleanor nodded, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Be careful, Malik," she said. "You're all I have." Her words hit him like a punch. He nodded, then climbed the embankment into the storm. Chicago was a battleground of snow and wind. The streets were nearly empty, the storm keeping most people indoors. Malik trudged through the drifts, his face stinging, his eyes watering. He didn't know where to go. Hospitals were too far, shelters too crowded, and he didn't trust cops, but he had to find something, someone, to help Eleanor. He made it to a corner store near the park where a payphone still worked. He fished out a quarter, his last one, and dialed 911, the operator's. Voice was brisk, impatient. "There's a lady," Malik said, his teeth chattering. "She's old, sick, under a bridge by the river. She needs help." "Location?" the operator asked. Near Grant Park, the old railway bridge. She's got no memory. Says her name's Eleanor." The operator asked more questions, but Malik's quarter ran out, and the line went dead. He cursed, slamming the receiver down. He didn't know if they'd send anyone. He didn't know if they'd care. Back at the bridge, Eleanor was worse. Her cough was wet, her face pale as the snow. Malik built up the fire, but it wasn't enough. He sat beside her, holding her hand, willing her to hold on. "Help's coming," he lied. "Just stay with me." She squeezed his hand, her grip weak. "You're a good boy," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Malik's throat tightened. He didn't feel good. He felt helpless, scared, like the cold was winning. But he stayed, talking to her, telling her stories of the streets, funny ones, like the time he'd outrun a stray dog with a stolen hot dog in his mouth. She smiled, and for a moment the bridge felt less like a tomb. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the city a different storm was brewing, one of wealth, power, and desperation. Elias Carter stood in his penthouse office, the Chicago skyline a blur of snow beyond the glass. At 45, he was a titan of tech, a billionaire, whose company, Carter Innovations, had revolutionized data storage. But today, he wasn't a titan. He was a son, and his mother was gone. Eleanor Carter, 72, had vanished 2 days ago. She'd been at a charity gala, elegant and sharp as ever, when she'd stepped outside for air. No one saw her leave, no one saw her after. Her driver waited for hours, but she never returned. The police found her car abandoned near Grant Park, the keys still in the ignition. Elias had mobilized everything: cops, private investigators, drones, even a helicopter when the weather allowed. The media was in a frenzy, headlines screaming, "Tech mogul's mother missing in blizzard." Every news channel carried her photo: silver hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could charm a room. But the storm had swallowed her, and the city had no answers. Elias paced, his phone buzzing with updates that led nowhere. His mother wasn't just a socialite, she was the heart of the Carter family, the one who'd taught him resilience, who'd built a foundation for the homeless, even as her son built an empire. She had early-stage dementia, manageable with medication, but stress or cold could trigger episodes of confusion. Elias cursed himself for not watching her closer, for letting her slip away. His assistant, Lena, burst in, her face pale. "Sir, the police got a call. A kid reported a woman matching Eleanor's description under a bridge near Grant Park. They're sending a team now." Elias froze, hope and fear colliding. "A bridge? Why the hell is she under a bridge?" "They don't know." The caller was a boy, sounded young, line cut off before they got more. Elias grabbed his coat. "I'm going. Get the chopper ready." "Sir, the storm—" "I don't care. She's my mother." Under the bridge, Malik was losing hope. The fire was dying, the wood nearly gone. Eleanor's breathing was shallow, her eyes half closed. He'd given her every scrap of warmth he had. His coat, his blanket, even his body heat, sitting close to shield her from the wind. But it wasn't enough. He heard the crunch of boots on snow, then voices. Flashlights cut through the dark, their beams dancing on the tarp. Malik tensed, ready to run. Cops weren't his friends, but Eleanor needed them. "Chicago PD," a voice barked. "Anyone here?" "Down here," Malik shouted, his voice hoarse. "She's hurt." The beams found them, and 2 officers slid down the embankment, their radios crackling. One knelt beside Eleanor, checking her pulse. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering. "Malik," she murmured. "He saved me." The officer glanced at Malik, surprised. "You the kid who called?" Malik nodded, his heart pounding. "She was in the park, lost. I brought her here." The second officer radioed for paramedics, then looked at Malik's shelter. The tarp, the fire, the cardboard. "You live here?" Malik didn't answer. He didn't trust cops, didn't trust anyone. But the officer's eyes softened, just for a moment. Paramedics arrived, bundling Eleanor onto a stretcher. Malik watched, his chest tight. She was leaving, and he'd be alone again. But she reached for him, her hand trembling. "Don't go," she said. "You're my hero." Malik swallowed hard, nodding. The cops didn't stop him as he followed the stretcher up the embankment, into the snow. Above, a helicopter roared, its spotlight cutting through the storm. Elias Carter leapt out before it fully landed, his face a mask of anguish. He ran to the stretcher, falling to his knees beside his mother. "Mom," he choked. "I thought I lost you." Eleanor smiled weakly. "This boy," she said, pointing to Malik. "He kept me alive." Elias looked at Malik, really looked at him. His ragged clothes, his chapped hands, his defiant eyes. He saw the bridge, the fire, the nothing that was Malik's life. And he saw something else. Courage, raw and unyielding. "What's your name?" Elias asked. "Malik," he said, his voice steady despite the cold. Elias nodded, his jaw tight. "You saved her. I owe you everything." Malik didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to owing or being owed. But as the paramedics loaded Eleanor into an ambulance, Elias put a hand on his shoulder. "You're coming with us," he said. "No arguments," Malik hesitated, then nodded. For the first time in years, he felt something like hope. The ambulance cut through Chicago's snow-choked streets, its siren a wail against the storm. Malik sat in the back, squeezed between a paramedic and the stretcher where Eleanor lay, her frail form strapped in, an oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. Her hand, cold but steady, gripped his, and Malik held on, his heart pounding in a way he didn't understand. He wasn't used to being needed, wasn't used to mattering. Elias Carter followed in a black SUV, its headlights piercing. The blizzard. He'd insisted Malik ride with his mother, a decision that left the boy uneasy. Rich people didn't trust street kids, not in Malik's experience. Yet Elias's eyes, raw with gratitude and fear, had held no judgment, only a promise Malik couldn't yet name. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the ambulance doors swung open, and a team of doctors and nurses swarmed. Eleanor was whisked away, her hand slipping from Malik's as orderlies rushed her to the ER. Malik stood frozen in the sterile hallway, the chaos of beeping monitors and shouted orders swallowing him. He felt small, out of place, his ragged coat dripping snow onto the polished floor. Elias appeared, his tailored overcoat a stark contrast to Malik's threadbare layers. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. Malik nodded, though he wasn't sure. "She gonna be all right?" "They're doing everything they can." Elias's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to the ER doors. "Hypothermia, maybe pneumonia. She's tough, but—" It was close. Malik swallowed, guilt gnawing at him. He'd done what he could, shared his blanket, his fire, his scraps of food. But it hadn't been enough. If he'd found her sooner, if he'd known how to call for help faster— "Hey," Elias said, catching his expression. "You saved her life. Don't doubt that." Malik looked away, his throat tight. He didn't know how to handle praise, didn't trust it. People said nice things, then walked away. That's how it worked. A nurse approached, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Mr. Carter, we need to admit your mother. She's stable for now, but we'll keep her in ICU for observation. Can we discuss her medical history?" Elias nodded, then turned to Malik. "Stay here. I'll be right back." Malik watched him go, the nurse's voice fading into the hospital's hum. He sank onto a plastic chair, the cold of the bridge still lingering in his bones. Around him, the waiting room buzzed, a mother soothing a crying toddler, an old man coughing into a handkerchief, a TV blaring news about the storm. Malik's eyes drifted to the screen, and his stomach dropped. There she was, Eleanor Carter, her face smiling in a photo from some fancy event, her silver hair swept into an elegant bun. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's mother missing in Chicago blizzard." The anchor's voice droned, "Last seen at a charity gala in the Loop. Elias Carter, CEO of Carter Innovations, has offered a $500,000 reward for information, leading to her safe return." Malik's breath caught. $500,000. More money than he could imagine. And he'd found her, saved her, without knowing who she was. A part of him wondered if he should have called sooner, claimed the reward, secured a way out of the streets. But another part, the part that had held Eleanor's hand through the night, recoiled at the thought. She wasn't a prize. She was. A person, Elias returned, his face a mix of relief and strain. "She's awake," he said. "Asking for you." Malik blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "Me?" "Yeah, you." Elias managed a tired smile. "Come on." They navigated the hospital's maze to the ICU, where Eleanor lay in a private room, tubes and monitors framing her like a fragile painting. Her eyes, brighter now, found Malik's, and she reached out a trembling hand. "My hero," she said, her voice weak but warm. Malik shuffled forward, embarrassed. "Just did what I could, ma'am." "You did more than anyone," she said. "You gave me hope." Elias stood by the bed, his expression unreadable. "Malik," he said, "I need to know something. Where do you live? Who takes care of you?" Malik tensed, his instincts screaming to lie, to run. But Eleanor's gaze held him, steady and kind. "I live under the bridge," he admitted. "Ain't nobody, just me." Elias's face darkened, not with anger but with something heavier, grief, maybe, or resolve. "Not anymore," he said. "You're not going back there." Malik's heart raced. "I don't need charity," he said, his voice sharp. "I get by." "This isn't charity," Elias said. "It's family. You saved my mother, Malik. That makes you one of us." Malik didn't know what to say. Family was a word from another world, one he'd never belonged to. But Eleanor squeezed his hand, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Morning, the storm had weakened, but a different tempest was brewing. News vans clogged the hospital's parking lot, reporters jostling for a shot of Elias Carter or a glimpse of the boy who'd saved Eleanor. The story had exploded overnight. Homeless boy rescues tech mogul's mother. Social media buzzed. With hashtags, Chicago hero, Malik the miracle, turning Malik into an unwilling celebrity. Inside the hospital, Malik was oblivious to the frenzy. He'd spent the night in a cot by Eleanor's bed, at her insistence, his sleep fitful but warm. Elias had arranged for clean clothes, jeans, a hoodie, sneakers that actually fit, and a hot breakfast that Malik devoured, though he felt guilty for enjoying it. Eleanor was improving, her cough less severe, her memory sharper. She told stories of her life, growing up in Chicago's South Side, building a foundation for the homeless, raising Elias to value kindness over wealth. Malik listened, fascinated, but uneasy. This wasn't his world. Elias, meanwhile, was fielding calls from his PR team, the police, and the mayor's office. The story was too big to contain, and he knew it. He wanted to protect Malik, but the boy's life was already public property. Reporters had dug into his past, or lack of it, painting him as a tragic hero, a street kid with a heart of gold. It was true in a way, but it made Malik a target, and Elias wasn't naive about the world's cruelty. He found Malik in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a tray of untouched pancakes. "You okay?" Elias asked, sitting across from him. Malik shrugged. "People keep looking at me. Nurses, doctors, everybody. Like I'm some kind of freak." "You're not a freak," Elias said. "You're a kid who did something extraordinary. The world's just catching up." Malik poked at his food. "They're saying stuff on the news. About me, about you. Ain't none of their business." Elias sighed. "I know. But it's out there now. We can't stop it, so we control it. I've got a press conference set up this afternoon. I want you there if you're willing." Malik's eyes widened. "Me? Talk to them cameras?" "You don't have to say much. Just be yourself. The world needs to see you, Malik, not the story they're spinning." Malik didn't like it, but he nodded. He owed Eleanor that much, and maybe Elias, too. But as they left the cafeteria, a man in a cheap suit blocked their path, a camera slung around his neck. "Malik, right?" the man said, his smile too wide. "I'm with the Tribune. Got a minute to tell your story? Kid like you saving a billionaire's mom, that's front-page gold." Elias stepped forward, his voice cold. "He's not talking. Back off." The reporter didn't flinch. "Come on, Mr. Carter. Public's got a right to know. Kid's a hero, right? Or is there more to it? Street kid, fancy family, makes you wonder." Malik's fists clenched, but Elias put a hand on his shoulder. "Walk away," Elias said to the reporter, "or I'll have security drag you out." The man smirked, but retreated, snapping a photo as he went. Malik's stomach churned. He wasn't a hero. He was just a kid who hadn't let an old lady die. Why did that make him news? The hospital's conference room was a circus of lights, cameras, and shouted questions. Malik stood beside Elias, his new clothes feeling like a costume, his hands stuffed in his pockets to hide their trembling. Eleanor, still too weak to attend, had sent a note. "Be brave, Malik. You're stronger than you know." He clung to her words, a lifeline in the chaos. Elias stepped to the podium, his presence commanding silence. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice steady. "My mother, Eleanor Carter, is alive today because of one person. Malik, a 12-year-old boy who found her in a storm and kept her safe when no one else could. He didn't know who she was. He didn't ask for a reward. He acted because it was right." The room erupted in questions, but Elias raised a hand. "Malik's not just a hero. He's a reminder of what we owe each other, especially those the world overlooks. He's been living on the streets, surviving on his own. That ends today. I'm making him a part of my family, legally and permanently." Malik's breath caught. He'd known Elias wanted to help, but this, adoption, a family, was real, public, binding. The cameras turned to him, their lenses like hungry eyes. Elias leaned down, whispering, "You want to say something?" Malik hesitated, then stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. "I ain't no hero, She was cold and I couldn't leave her. Anybody would have done it." The room went quiet, then exploded again, reporters shouting his name. Malik stepped back, overwhelmed, but Elias's hand on his shoulder grounded him. "You did good," Elias said. "Let's get out of here." Outside, the snow had stopped, the city gleaming under a rare winter sun. But Malik felt the weight of the world's eyes, and he wasn't sure he could carry it. That evening, Elias took Malik to the Carter family home, a sprawling mansion in Lincoln Park, its stone facade glowing under floodlights. Malik had never seen anything like it. Iron gates, manicured gardens buried in snow, windows that stretched to the sky. It was a castle, and he was a trespasser. Inside, the house was warm, polished, overwhelming. Marble floors, chandeliers, art. On the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum, Malik's sneakers squeaked, his reflection distorted in a gilded mirror. Elias led him to a guest room, bigger than his entire shelter under the bridge, with a bed piled with pillows, a desk, a window overlooking the city. "This is yours," Elias said, "for as long as you want it." Malik stared, his throat tight. I don't belong here." "You do," Elias said. "You belong wherever there's kindness, and you've got that in spades." Malik didn't argue, but he didn't believe it either. He was a street kid, a nobody. This was a loan, not a life. Still, he nodded, because Elias's eyes held the same fierce hope as Eleanor's. That night, Malik lay in the bed, the sheets too soft, the silence too deep. He thought of the bridge, the train's rumble, the river's cold breath. He thought of Eleanor, safe now, and the cameras, the reporters, the world that wouldn't let him go. Sleep came slowly, haunted by dreams of snow and shadows. The next week was a blur. Eleanor was released from the hospital, her recovery slow but steady. She moved back to the mansion, insisting Malik sit with her each day, telling him stories or asking about his life. She didn't pry, didn't judge, just listened, her presence a balm to his unease. But outside the mansion's gates, the world was relentless. Reporters camped out, paparazzi snapping photos whenever Malik left the house. Social media dissected him, his past, his motives, his worthiness to be a Carter. Some called him a saint, others a scam artist. A tabloid claimed he'd manipulated Eleanor for the reward, a lie that stung more than Malik expected. Elias hired a lawyer to start the adoption process, but it wasn't simple. Malik had no birth certificate, no records, no proof he existed. The system didn't trust a kid like him, and neither did some of Elias's circle. At a dinner with Carter Innovations Board, Malik overheard a board member whisper, "He's a liability. A street kid in the family? It's a PR nightmare." Malik wanted to run, to disappear back to the bridge where no one cared who he was. But Eleanor's voice stopped him, her words from the hospital echoing. "You're my hero." He stayed, for her, for the promise of something better. One afternoon, while Elias was at the office, a stranger approached the mansion's gate. A man in a leather jacket, his face scarred, his eyes sharp. He claimed to be a cousin, someone from Malik's mother's side, drawn by the news. "Your family," the man said, his smile crooked. "I can take you home." Malik's instincts screamed danger. He'd never heard of a cousin, never known any family. The man's eyes lingered on the mansion, on the wealth beyond the gate. "I don't know you," Malik said, backing away. The man's smile faded. "You'll regret this, kid. Blood's thicker than money." Security escorted him off, but the encounter left Malik shaken. Was he betraying his past by staying, or was the past betraying him? He didn't know, but the weight of his new life was growing heavier. Malik stood in the Carter Mansion's library, a room that smelled of old books and polished wood, its shelves towering like the skyscrapers of downtown Chicago. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in the air, but Malik felt no warmth. He was dressed in new clothes, a crisp button-up shirt, khakis, shoes that didn't pinch, but they felt like a disguise. At 12, he was a boy, out of place, a street kid in a palace, and the world outside wouldn't let him forget it. It had been 2 weeks since the hospital, since Elias Carter had declared Malik part of his family. The adoption process was underway, but it was a maze of paperwork and skepticism. Malik had no birth certificate, no social security number, no proof he was anyone. The state demanded records, and the courts demanded answers. Social workers visited the mansion, their clipboards and polite smiles masking doubt. "A remarkable story," one said, her eyes lingering on Malik's calloused hands. "But we need to ensure stability. Stability!" The word felt like a taunt. Malik had survived the streets, the cold, the hunger. Didn't that count? But the system saw a risk, a boy with no past who didn't fit the Carter mold. Elias's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Hargrove, was fighting for him, digging through city archives for any trace of Malik's mother. So far, nothing. It was as if Malik had been born from the shadows of the bridge. Eleanor, now home and recovering, was his anchor. She spent hours with him, teaching him to play chess on a marble board, her laughter softening the mansion's grandeur. "You're a quick study," she said, moving her knight, "like Elias was at your age." Malik pushed a pawn, his fingers hesitant. "I ain't like him. He's important." Eleanor's eyes softened. "You're important, Malik. You saved me. That's no small thing." He wanted to believe her, but the world outside was louder. The media frenzy hadn't died down. It had mutated. Reporters camped beyond the mansion's gates, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. Talk shows debated his story. Was he a hero or a hustler? A local radio host called him a feel-good stunt for the Carter brand. And the words burned. Malik avoided the news, but snippets slipped through. Tweets, headlines, whispers from Elias's staff. Some praised him, others questioned why a billionaire would adopt a street rat. Elias shielded him as best he could. He'd hired a tutor to help Malik catch up on school, enrolled him in a private academy for the spring, and assigned a bodyguard, a quiet man named Victor who shadowed Malik outside the mansion. But Elias couldn't stop the doubts creeping into Malik's mind. Did he belong here? Could he ever? One afternoon, while Eleanor napped, Malik slipped into the kitchen, where the cook, Mrs. Delaney, was kneading dough. She was kind, her Irish accent warm, but Malik kept his distance from the staff, wary of their glances. He grabbed an apple, intending to retreat, when Mrs. Delaney spoke. "You're a brave lad," she said, not looking up. "What you did for Mrs. Carter, not many would," Malik shrugged, uncomfortable. "Didn't do much," she snorted. "You gave her your home, such as it was. That's more than most." She paused, wiping flour from her hands. "Don't let the noise out there change you. You're enough." Her words stayed with him, a small light in the dark. But the dark was growing, and Malik wasn't sure he could outrun it. The stranger from the gate, the man claiming to be Malik's cousin, hadn't vanished. His name was Ronnie, or so he said, and he kept appearing, a shadow at the edges of Malik's new life. He'd been spotted near the mansion, loitering. At a coffee shop across the street, his leather jacket unmistakable. Victor, the bodyguard, had chased him off twice, but Ronnie left notes, slipped under the gate or tucked into the mailbox. "We're family," one read. "You can't run from blood." Malek didn't trust him. Ronnie's eyes were too hungry, his smile too sharp. He reminded Malik of the hustlers under the bridge, men who'd steal your shoes and call it a favor. But Ronnie's claims gnawed at him. What if he was family? What if Malik's mother had relatives, people who'd known her, loved her? The thought was a hook, pulling him toward a past he couldn't remember. He didn't tell Elias about the notes. Elias had enough to deal with, running his company, caring for Eleanor, navigating the adoption. But Malik kept the notes, hidden in a sock under his bed, their words a secret he wasn't ready to share. One evening, while Elias was at a board meeting, Malik sat in the library, trying to read a book the tutor had assigned. The words blurred. His mind on Ronnie. He didn't hear Victor approach until the bodyguard cleared his throat. "Kid," Victor said, his voice low, "we got a problem. That guy's back. Left something at the gate." Malik's stomach twisted. "What is it?" Victor held up a crumpled envelope, unsealed. Inside was a photo, a faded Polaroid of a young woman with Malik's eyes, holding a toddler, on the back in shaky handwriting. "Your mom. You owe me. Malik." Malik's breath caught. The woman's face was a ghost, a memory he couldn't grasp. Was it her? He didn't know. But the photo felt real, heavy with a truth he couldn't ignore. "Who gave you this?" Malik asked, his voice shaking. "Some punk in a leather jacket," Victor said. "Dropped it and ran. Cops are looking, but he's slippery." Malik clutched the photo, his heart racing. "Don't tell Mr. Carter. Not yet." Victor frowned, his loyalty to Elias clear, but he nodded. "You're the boss on this one. But be careful, kid. Guys like that don't show up for love." Malik didn't sleep that night. The photo stayed under his pillow, a question he couldn't answer. Who was Ronnie, and what did he want? The adoption hearing was held in a gray courthouse downtown, its marble halls echoing with the weight of decisions. Malik sat beside Elias, his new suit stiff, his hands sweaty. Ms. Hargrove, the lawyer, had prepped him. "Answer clearly, don't. Lie, stay calm." But the courtroom felt like a trap, the judge's bench a mountain he couldn't climb. The state's attorney, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper voice, didn't trust the adoption. "Mr. Carter's intentions are admirable," she said, "but we have concerns. The minor has no documented history, no family ties. His presence in the Carter household raises questions of motive and stability." Motive. The word stung. Malik's fists clenched under the table. Did they think he'd saved Eleanor for money? "For this?" Mrs. Hargrove countered, her voice steady. "Malik's lack of records is a symptom of systemic failure, not his fault. He's proven his character through selfless action. Mr. Carter is offering a stable, loving home, something the state has failed to provide." Elias spoke, his voice raw. "Malik saved my mother's life. He's not a risk. He's a gift. I want to give him the future he deserves." The judge, an older man with tired eyes, listened, his pen tapping. Malik was called to speak, his heart pounding as he stood. "I ain't here for money," he said, his voice small but firm. I want a family, like anybody." The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. The judge adjourned, promising a ruling soon. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions Malik couldn't hear over the blood in his ears. Elias guided him to the car, Victor clearing a path. "You did good," Elias said. "No matter what, you're with us." But Malik wasn't sure. The state's doubts mirrored his own. What if he didn't belong? What if Ronnie was right, and blood was thicker? Back at the mansion, life settled into a fragile routine. Malik attended tutoring sessions, his mind sharp but unpolished, soaking up math and reading like a sponge. Eleanor joined him when she could, her strength returning, her stories bridging the gap between their worlds. Elias was busy, his company facing a hostile takeover bid, but he made time for Malik, teaching him to shoot hoops in the driveway or watching old sci-fi movies in the home theater. But Ronnie's shadow loomed. He sent more notes, each bolder. "Meet me or I go to the press. You can't hide from family. One included another photo, this time of Malik's mother with a man, Ronnie younger, smirking. Malik's doubt grew. Was Ronnie telling the truth? And if he was, what did he want? Malik confided in Eleanor, showing her the photos one afternoon in her garden room, its glass walls framing the snowy city. She studied them, her face thoughtful. This man, she said, he's using your past to hurt you. Family doesn't threaten, Malik. It protects. But what if he's all I got? Malik asked, his voice breaking. What if my mom wanted me with him? Eleanor took his hand. Your mother would want you safe, loved. You have that here. Don't let this man steal it. Malik nodded, but the hook was deep. That night he slipped out of the mansion, telling Victor he needed air. He didn't go far, just to the gate, where Ronnie waited, leaning against a lamppost. His breath fogging in the cold. You came, Ronnie said, his smile predatory. Smart kid. What do you want? Malik demanded, his voice steady despite his fear. Family, Ronnie said, mocking, and a piece of what you've got. Carter's got billions. You're his kid now. Share the wealth, and I'll leave. You alone? Malik's stomach turned. I ain't got nothing, and you ain't my family. Ronnie's eyes narrowed. You'll regret that. I know things about your mom, about you. Papers'll love it. Malik turned to go, but Ronnie grabbed his arm. Victor appeared, silent as a ghost, his hand on Ronnie's wrist. Let him go, Victor said, his voice ablade. Ronnie released Malik, smirking. This ain't over, kid. Victor escorted Malik back, his silence heavy. You tell Mr. Carter, Victor said, or I will. Malik nodded, shame burning. He'd been stupid, thinking he could handle Ronnie alone. But the photos, the notes, they were a chain to a past he couldn't escape. The next morning, Malik told Elias everything, the words spilling out in the library, the photos spread on the table. Elias listened, his face unreadable, then called Ms. Hargrove and a private investigator, a gruff man named Torres. This guy's a con, Torres said, studying the photos. Probably knew your mother, saw a chance to cash in. We'll find. Him, Elias looked at Malik, his eyes fierce. You don't owe him anything. You're my son, Malik, not his. The word son hit Malik like a wave. He nodded, unable to speak, but the fear lingered. Ronnie wasn't just a con. He was a threat, and Malik had brought him to the Carters' door. That afternoon the news broke. A tabloid published a story, Carter's new son, a criminal connection. It claimed Malik's cousin had proof of a shady past, hinting at drug deals and theft tied to Malik's mother. The photos were there, grainy but damning, alongside lies that twisted Malik's story into something ugly. Eleanor was furious, her hands shaking as she turned off the TV. Lies, she said. They're vultures, Malik. Don't believe them. But Malik did, in part, not the lies, but the weight of his past. He was a nobody, a kid from nowhere, dragging the Carters down. He thought of the bridge, the cold simplicity of survival. Maybe he'd been wrong to leave it. That night he packed a bag, just a hoodie, the photos, a few dollars. He wrote a note. Thanks for everything. I don't belong here. Malik. He slipped out, the mansion's silence heavy, and headed for the gate. But Victor was waiting, his arms crossed. Going somewhere? Malik froze. Let me go, man. I'm trouble. Victor shook his head. Your family. Trouble's part. Of the deal, get back inside. Malik wanted to argue, but Victor's eyes were kind, steady. He followed him back, the note crumpled in his pocket. Maybe he couldn't run. Maybe he had to fight. Malik woke to the sound of Eleanor's voice, soft but firm, calling him to breakfast. The mansion's warmth was a stark contrast to the cold resolve he'd felt the night before, when he'd nearly run back to the bridge. Victor's intervention had stopped him, but the weight of Ronnie's threats and the tabloid's lies still pressed on his chest. He wasn't sure he could stay, but he wasn't sure he could leave either. Downstairs, the dining room glowed with morning light, its long table set with pancakes, fruit, and coffee that smelled like a luxury Malik couldn't name. Eleanor sat. At the head, her silver hair neat, her smile a beacon. Elias was beside her, his phone silent for once, his eyes on Malik as he entered. "You're up," Elias said, his voice warm but searching. "Sleep okay?" Malik nodded, sliding into a chair. "Yeah, fine." Eleanor reached for his hand, her grip stronger now, her recovery nearly complete. "We're proud of you, Malik. For staying. For fighting." Malik's throat tightened. He hadn't told them about his attempt to leave, but Victor must have. He waited for a seventh, but their eyes held no judgment, only understanding. "I didn't do nothing special," he mumbled, poking at his pancakes. "You did everything," Elias said, his voice firm. "And we're going to put an end to this nonsense with that con artist. Torres is close to nailing him." Malik nodded, but his mind was on Ronnie. The private investigator, Torres, had been digging into the man's past, uncovering a string of petty crimes. Extortion, fraud, assault. The photos of Malik's mother were real, Torres confirmed, likely stolen from her belongings after her death. Ronnie had no claim to Malik, only a grudge and a greed for the Carter fortune. But knowing that didn't erase the fear. Ronnie was out there, and he wasn't done. After breakfast, Elias took Malik to the Carter Innovations office, a sleek tower in the Loop, to keep him distracted. The building hummed with activity, employees tapping at keyboards, screens glowing with data. Elias introduced Malik as "my son," the word still jarring, and the staff smiled, some genuinely, others with the guarded curiosity Malik had come to recognize. He felt like an exhibit, but Elias's pride was real, a shield against the stares. In Elias's office, a glass-walled space overlooking the snowy city, Malik sat on a leather couch, flipping through a tech magazine he didn't understand. Elias worked at his desk, fielding calls about the takeover bid threatening his company. The tension was palpable, but Elias paused to toss Malik a stress ball. "Catch," he said, grinning. Malik caught it, a small laugh escaping. For a moment, he felt like a kid, not a headline, but the moment shattered when Torres called. "We got him," Torres said, his voice gruff over the speakerphone. "Ronnie's holed up in a motel on the south side. He's been emailing tabloids trying to sell more lies. I've got evidence, texts, recordings, even a witness who says he bragged about shaking you down." Elias's face hardened. "Can we press charges?" "Already working on it," Torres said. "Extortion, harassment, maybe forgery, but he's slippery. We need to move fast." Malik's heart raced. "What if he runs?" Torres's voice was grim. "He won't. I've got eyes on him. But Malik, he's desperate. Desperate men do stupid things." Elias ended the call, his eyes meeting Malik's. "We're ending this today. You're safe, Malik. I promise." But Malik wasn't so sure. Ronnie wasn't just a con, he was a ghost from the past, a reminder of the life Malik had fought to escape. And ghosts didn't vanish easily. That evening, Torres devised a plan. Lure Ronnie to a meeting, posing as a tabloid editor willing to pay for his story. Malik would stay at the mansion with Victor and Eleanor under lockdown. Elias would join Torres, ensuring Ronnie was caught red-handed. Malik hated being sidelined, but he agreed, his trust in Elias stronger than his fear. The trap was set for a diner near the motel, a gritty spot where Ronnie wouldn't suspect a sting. Torres had Chicago PD on standby, their radios quiet to avoid tipping him off. Elias left the mansion at dusk, his jaw set, his promise to Malik echoing, "This ends tonight." Malik sat with Eleanor in the library, the chessboard between them, but his mind was elsewhere. The mansion was a fortress, security, cameras, locked gates, Victor patrolling, but Malik felt exposed, like Ronnie's eyes were on him through the walls. Eleanor moved her queen, her voice calm. "You're stronger than him, Malik. Stronger than you know." He wanted to believe her, but the hours dragged, each tick of the clock a hammer on his nerves. Then, at 9 p.m., Elias called. "We got him," Elias said, his voice tight with relief. "He showed up, tried to sell forged documents. Letters he claimed were from your mom. Cops grabbed him before he could blink. He's in custody." Malik's breath caught. "It's over." "It's over," Elias said. He's facing years, Malik. He can't touch you now. Malik sank into his chair, the weight lifting, but not gone. Ronnie was caught, but the scars he'd left, the doubts, the fear, would take longer to fade. Eleanor hugged him, her warmth a reminder of why he'd stayed. "You're home," she whispered. "You're ours." The adoption hearing reconvened a week later, the courthouse less intimidating now, though Malik's nerves still jangled. Ronnie's arrest had shifted the narrative. The tabloid story collapsed under scrutiny, its lies exposed by Torres's evidence. Public sentiment swung hard in Malik's favor. Social media flooded with support. Such justice for Malik, Naksh Carter family hero. The media, once vultures, now cast him as a symbol of hope, a boy who'd risen above his past. Inside the courtroom, Ms. Hargrove presented the new evidence, Ronnie's criminal record, his failed extortion, and testimonials from Eleanor and Elias. "Malik is not a risk," she said, her voice ringing. "He's a child who deserves a family, and the Carters are that family." The state's attorney, chastened by the media storm, offered little resistance. "We acknowledge the minor's actions and the Carters' commitment," she said. "Pending final documentation, we see no objection." Malik took the stand, his voice steadier this time. "I ain't perfect," he said, looking at the judge, "but I want to be here, with them. They're my home." The judge nodded, his eyes kind. "Young man, you've shown remarkable courage. This court sees no reason to deny you the family. You've earned." He signed the order, and the gavel fell. Malik Carter was official. The courtroom erupted in applause, Elias pulling Malik into a hug, Eleanor wiping tears from her cheeks. Outside, reporters waited, but this time, Malik didn't. "Flinch!" He held Elias's hand, Eleanor's arm around his shoulders, and faced the cameras. "I'm just Malik," he said, his voice clear, "and I'm home." The photos that followed, Malik smiling between Elias and Eleanor, went viral, a beacon of hope in a cynical world. The headlines changed. From homeless to hero, Malik Carter's new beginning. For once, Malik didn't mind the noise. It was his story, and he was proud of it. Spring came to Chicago, the snow melting into rivers that sparkled under the sun. Malik started at the private academy, his uniform crisp, his backpack heavy with books. He was behind, but his tutor had prepared him, and his classmates, some wary, most curious, welcomed him in time. He made a friend, a quiet girl named Aisha, who loved sci-fi as much as he did, and they spent lunch hours debating alien invasions. The mansion was no longer a castle. It was home. Malik's room was his own, filled with books, a basketball hoop, and a photo of him with Elias and Eleanor. At the courthouse, framed in silver, he visited the bridge once with Victor to say goodbye to the boy he'd been. The tarp was gone, the crates scattered, but the river still flowed, a reminder of his strength. Elias's company survived the takeover bid thanks to a rally of loyal investors inspired by Malik's story. Carter Innovations launched a new initiative, the Eleanor Carter Foundation, to fund shelters and programs for homeless youth. Malik was its ambassador, speaking at events with a confidence he hadn't known he had. "I was you," he told kids in shelters, his voice steady. "You're enough. Don't give up." Eleanor, fully recovered, was his biggest cheerleader. She baked cookies with him, taught him to garden, and told him stories of her own struggles, proving no one was born to wealth. Her love was a fire, warming the parts of Malik the streets had frozen. One evening, as the family sat in the garden room, the city's lights twinkling beyond the glass, Malik spoke. "I was scared," he said, his voice soft. "Thought I didn't belong. But you showed me I did." Elias smiled, his eyes bright. "You showed us, Malik. You made us better." Eleanor raised her glass, lemonade, not wine, at Malik's request. "To family," she said. "And to the boy who warmed our hearts." They clinked glasses, the sound a promise. Malik looked at them, his family, and knew he was home. By summer, Malik's story had faded from the headlines, but its impact lingered. The Eleanor Carter Foundation opened its first shelter, a warm, safe space for kids like Malik had been. He cut the ribbon, his smile wide, the cameras flashing for a good cause. Donors poured in, inspired by his journey, and Elias matched every dollar, his pride in Malik a quiet force. Malik kept the photos of his mother, now in a proper frame on his desk. Torres had found her name, Lila Jackson, and a few records. A nurse, kind-hearted, taken too soon by illness. Malik visited her grave, a simple stone in a Southside cemetery, and left flowers. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered. "I'm home." Ronnie was sentenced to 7 years, his lies buried under the weight of evidence. Malik didn't hate him, only pitied him, a man too broken to see what Malik had found. The past was a shadow, but Malik walked in the light. At 13, Malik stood taller, his eyes brighter. He played basketball with Elias, read novels with Eleanor, and dreamed of college, maybe engineering like Elias, but his biggest dream was simpler: to help others, to give back the kindness he'd received. One night, under a sky full of stars, Malik sat on the mansion's roof with Aisha, their sci-fi books forgotten. "You ever think about the future?" she asked. "Yeah," Malik said, grinning. "It's going to be good," and it was. Malik Carter, once a boy beneath a bridge, had found his place, his purpose. His story wasn't just his, it was a spark, lighting the way for others. The world watched, and it learned. A single act of kindness, born in the cold, could warm a life forever. Years later, Malik stood at a podium, now a young man, his voice strong as he addressed a crowd at the Foundation's 10th anniversary. The shelter had grown into a network, saving thousands. Elias and Eleanor, grayer but proud, watched from the front row. "One act," Malik said, his eyes sweeping the room. "That's all it takes. I was cold, lost, invisible. But someone saw me, and I saw her. That moment changed everything. So look around. See someone. Help them. Because a small act in the ice can warm a life, maybe yours." The crowd roared, but Malik's eyes were on his family. Eleanor's smile, Elias's nod. They were his home, his heart. And as he stepped down, a kid from the shelter approached, shy but hopeful. "Can I be like you?" the boy asked. Malik knelt, his voice soft. "You already are." And in that moment, the message was clear. One small act in the ice can warm a life forever.